Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen. So nuclear weapons is the absolute strong weapon, so they can ignore other conditions of the country. So however now, so United Nations have such the countries to position the nuclear weapon. So however, so every country should be able to oppose the other countries' operation, so then they need more strong or equal power. So we strongly propose this motion. In my speech, mainly touch on three issues. First, I explain the status quo situation. So status quo is very unbalanced and unfair situation. So then small countries cannot oppose other countries' operation. And secondly, so I explain the after plan adoption. So if we take this proportion, so we can, each country has the equal power, so then they can negotiate fairly, so then such problem can be solved. And thirdly, so I explain the importance of such situation, so, so every country is right. So before that, I explain the context of this debate. So under the status quo, the United Nations capped the, yes please.
Because of power balance of the international society, such kind of unfairness always exists. For example, some country may get sanctioned because of the decision of such kind of strong country.
Okay, I explain later. So before that, I explain the context of this debate. So now the United Nations, so United Nations cap the usual countries, so except the limited countries, for example, United Nations or China, and so forth. So, however, if we take this proportion, so United Nations allows so all countries to position the nuclear power plant. So that is our definition. So firstly, I explain the status quo unbalanced situation. So, Mr. Speaker, so now, so not each country has the equal power. So because each country has the military power, for example, related to the population or resources or each country's technology. Moreover, so the international society, especially the United Nations, don't allow the usual countries to position nuclear power plant. So they cap the defense power. So it's a severe situation. Why? Because, for example, the small, weak countries cannot defeat or refuse the big or strong countries' operation. So, for example, Chinese case, so Chinese oppress the other Asian countries, for example, Vietnam. So they want to get the petroleum. So then, so they claim the territory problem. So, however, so Vietnam country and so forth, they cannot refuse strongly. So because so even if they refuse, so and even if the war happens, so such small countries understand, so they cannot won because so the military power is unfair and unbalanced. So they cannot strongly refuse such problem. So for status quo, so every country, usual country don't write. So then they have no choice to write the nuclear power plants. So, and moreover, even if they choose to position the nuclear power plant, so they criticize from the international society, and in many cases, so international society punishes them economically. For example, North Korea in case. So then the status quo is very unfair. So, however, if we take this proportion, so the United Nations allow each country, so then and they banish the such cap. So then each country can have the equal power. So for example, so even the small countries, they can oppose the big countries' operation. So because the nuclear power plant is a very strong and absolutely weapon, so then only one nuclear power plant, nuclear power weapons. So they can destroy any other weapons, for example, tanks and so forth. And moreover, they can destroy the countries or cities systems completely, for example, the electricity or the water infrastructure. And moreover, they can ignore the manpower and so because so they can kill so many people or many soldiers. So then, so the nuclear power plant ignore. So then nuclear power plant can ignore the country condition. So then if the small countries get the nuclear power plant, so they can have the equal power to the big countries.
So,
okay, yes, please.
don't you think ability of making more strong nuclear weapon can be the next unfair condition?
Sorry, I don't think so. So if each country has a nuclear weapon, so the strong deterrence occurs. So because each country can get the fair power, so they have the equal military power. So even if so the Mr. Tagai said, so the numbers of the nuclear powers is nearly different. However, so only one nuclear power, so it's very severe. So then, even the big countries, they cannot ignore such nuclear power. So even big countries, they cannot oppress the small countries. So the fair negotiation occurs. So then small countries can protect themselves and they can oppose the other countries' operation. So it's a very significant fight because each country has the right to protect themselves or oppose themselves the operation. So for example, the countries can decide their policy or so what they use their resources and so forth. So then in this case, so the United, if we take the proportion, so we can solve the status quo problem, so because of the unfairness. So that's all. Thank you.
Firstly, I will repeat what the previous speaker has said, and secondly, I will explain my argument. I have two arguments. The first one is why status quo is fine, and secondly, after taking this proposal, that the country who are economically isolated have more and more nuclear weapons. Let me move the reputation. I have two reputations. He said that in the status quo that there are the unfair situation. So if the country have a nuclear weapon, such country can get a high position. However, it is not true. We think it is not only way that having nuclear weapon is not only way to get high status. For example, Japan, Japan don't have a nuclear weapon. However, Japan have an economical power, and the Japan's status is not so low. So we think the having nuclear weapon is not only way to solve this problem. And moreover, after taking this proposal, the more harmful situation will happen. So I will explain later. So their argument doesn't stand. And secondly, he said that after taking this proposal, the problem will be solved. However, we think even after taking this proposal, the rich people can make more and more nuclear weapons, and poor country cannot make much nuclear weapons. So we think that even after taking this proposal, there are the unfair situation between rich country and poor country. So their argument doesn't stand. Let me move on my argument. Firstly, why status quo is fine. As in the status quo, only limited country can have nuclear weapons. Why is that? Because we think such country have a capacity. I divide the capacity. I explain the 4 types of capacity. The first one is capacity of manage the nuclear weapon, and secondly, capacity of the protecting the nuclear weapon from robbing by the dangerous group like the Taliban, and thirdly, the capacity of recovering the accident of nuclear weapon, and fourthly, capacity to not using nuclear weapon rashly. So first one, if after taking this proposal, every country can get a nuclear weapon. So after taking this proposal, even if such country don't have an incentive to use the nuclear weapon, they cannot manage the nuclear weapon. So the nuclear weapon will explode. And secondly, the capacity of protecting the nuclear weapon from dangerous group. For example, the Pakistan have a nuclear weapon, but international society don't recognize the Pakistan to have a nuclear weapon, and in the status quo, the Pakistan is have faced with a danger of the robbing from the Taliban. So even if Pakistan don't have an incentive to use the nuclear weapon, if the Taliban get the Pakistan's nuclear weapon, the Taliban use the nuclear weapon. So and such group is irrational. So they because they don't have to care about the relationship with other people, so they use the nuclear weapon. And thirdly, the capacity of the recovering the accident. So after taking this proposal, the country which cannot settle the accident, the situation will be serious. And fourthly, the capacity of using a nuclear weapon. Every country, the country who have a low status use the nuclear weapon because they use the nuclear weapon for diplomacy of for their own, and so they pretend to launch the nuclear weapon. So it means that the possibility to use the nuclear weapon will increase. So only in the status quo, the only limited country who can manage or protecting a recovering accident or don't using the nuclear weapon can get the nuclear weapon. And secondly, after taking this proposal, the number of nuclear weapons will be increased because for economically isolated country, they don't have a trade with other countries like North Korea and Iraq, and they are irrational, so they will make more and more nuclear weapons. So it means that very dangerous situation. So to protect such situation, we oppose this motion. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it status quo is unfair, and why the fair is very important. Because there is an example about the exploit, and there is not, and in a status quo there is nothing determines power. So after taking proposal that there is nothing exploit, and there is justification to have the nuclear power plant, and there's a power determines power. So we proud to propose this motion. And first of all, I like rebuttal for previous speaker that I like show all the point. And first of all, they said the Japan don't have a nuclear weapon, but there's increase of economy. But we believe it. Yes, it is true. But Japan case is so rare case. So I mean, the other country is not saying, so only the rare case, so there's argument doesn't stand. And second of all, they said the rich country have a weapon, but poor person can't get a weapon. So basically, it is unfair. But we believe it is not true. That because we believe that to give the right. So I mean, to give the choice is a very important thing. So of course, Japan used the economy and they improved their military, but North Korea is using the all power in the country. So every country's resource, the power resource, and resource different. So every country have a different priority. So they try to make the weapon. So it is not that stand and they said Pakistan is also, Taliban is also irrational, so they will use the nuclear weapon. But we believe it is not true. That because, of course, even if they're irrational, they know that how it is so very important about the nuclear weapon. It is we will have a big power. So they know that if they use their nuclear weapon, there's a possibility to give attack by other country. So there's argument doesn't stand. Then I like to move on to our point. The first of all the justification, and second is the exploit, and third is deterrence power. That I like to spread one by one. The first of all justification, we believe the country is same as the human. Why? Because they're like a country, so government have the gathering there is the citizen's voice. And moreover, government have a right. The government have to protect their citizen. Military power is to protect the citizens' rights for uniquely. So, and moreover, the citizens, if the other country attack the country, the citizens can no way to protect own. So only government can protect the citizens. And moreover, the nuclear power have the big power. The nuclear weapon have the big power. So if every country have the nuclear weapon, and the military problem is every country fair. So there is a possibility to protect the citizen. So the government can protect their citizens' life. So there's a justification. So their justification is, their justification. And second of all, the exploit. In a status quo, there's the country give the exploit for other country. So in the country have the nuclear weapon, but other country not have the nuclear weapon. So if they're having their nuclear weapon country said please give it some resources and so on, they're not nothing nuclear weapon country can't refuse about other things. So I mean it is kind of the first choice, because if the denied is think that there's a possibility to attack by nuclear weapon, so they can't deny, so they have to give the resource. So we believe it is a very bad situation in the status quo. And third of all, after taking proposal, there is called the determinants power. In a status quo, for example, the USA give the right to possess the gun. So gun is, and why every citizen have the right to possess the gun? Because they have the right to protect their own. So it's their own responsibility. So it is a kind of deterrence power, because if they hit the other person, there's possibility to give their gun. So basically therefore the USA have a right. So USA give the right to possess a gun for the citizen. So we believe it is the same situation. So if every country have the nuclear weapon, so we believe there's a part of deterrence power, and there is a possibility to the more decreased war or conflict. So we believe it is a good for the situation, a good situation, more good for the all over the world. So today I want to tell you that after taking proposal there exists, so in a status quo today I want to tell you that their justification to have nuclear weapon, and there is nothing exploit, so there is more fair situation in the car, and there is a deterrence power. So we believe that there's more decrease about the war or conflict. So in order to keep the more safety situation. So from this reason, I strongly propose this motion. Thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me clarify the basic line of the opposition. We believe that only limited country should have a right to possess a nuclear weapon. Because there are other country, or the country who don't have the capacity to possess a nuclear weapon, like the case of the irrational country, we think this is a danger for the international society. It's so huge to refute that. That's why we think their case makes false. We're going to talk about two issues in my speech. Firstly, the fairness between the country to country, or the fairness to nuclear weapon, having nuclear weapon exist or not. And secondly, we're going to talk about how dangerous if all countries have the right to start to have the nuclear weapon. So let's start. All rebuttal will integrate it. Firstly, be fairness. 3D mentioned that the fair negotiation is important. However, first we say, as I mentioned in my point of information, that's not can be achieved after taking disposal, because number of the nuclear weapon or the technology to develop the nuclear weapon or the ability to or the ability of the nuclear weapon itself can be the new status after taking disposal. That's why we think such kind of fair negotiation cannot be achieved. And more we say it is not important. We think in the viewpoint of international society, they fail to explain why fair negotiation between the country who try to threaten by the nuclear weapon to the other country or international society, or try to demand the unreasonable requirement is why such kind of countries fairness is extremely important. They fail to explain. That's why we think it's not important. And Goshima mentioned that country have the right to protect their own citizens. We say international society also have the right to refuse such kind of new country to have a nuclear weapon, because by criticizing or sanctioning or sometimes intervening. That's why we think their analysis must be false, because the international society also have the right to protect their own citizens. We say the power imbalance is justified in the international society, because international society have no united power, because there is no government who govern such kind of international society or all country. That's why we think only the power can be the criteria to evaluate the having or so forth. That's why if the country, international society want to do that, sanction or intervention can be happen. That's why we say the power imbalance inside the country can be happened even in the status quo, and this is totally justifiable in the viewpoint of international society. That's why we think the fairness should not be respected in the first place. That's why we think there's no justification who have as long as international society don't want as long as international society or United States or a lot of country don't want such kind of irrational country to have the nuclear weapon. We say there's no justification at all in the viewpoint of the international society. So that's why we say that's why we think that there is no justification at all. So let's move on to the issue of the practicality. How dangerous after plan adoption? First, we say we characterize the irrational country who are maybe politically isolated or economically isolated. In this country, the reason why they want to have the nuclear weapon, like the case of North Korea or like the case of Iraq, they want the unreasonable threat or unreasonable demand by threatening the nuclear weapon. We say this kind of unreasonable threat cannot be justifiable, because this is simply the unreasonable, because they can ignore the other condition of the negotiation, like the case of economical benefit of both sides or so forth. That's why we say international society should not accept that. And moreover, we say this is also important, that is such kind of country highly likely to use the nuclear weapon, because they have no other condition compared with other countries who are complicated by the economical and political condition. And irrational leader or maybe dictatorship can sometimes ignore such kind of the United Nations, and they don't fear the revenge of this kind of situation. In this situation, we say it is highly likely to use them compared with other countries. We say it is extremely serious, because the damage of the nuclear weapon is so strong that, for example, there are a lot of the nuclear radioactive remain in this land, and then nobody can live in this society for long years. That's why we think this situation or the risk of the using nuclear weapon is not accepted in terms of international society. And secondly, we say that in order to deter such kind of usage of a nuclear weapon after adoption, as a strong country, try to increase the number of technology of the nuclear weapon. We say it is also dangerous, because considering the reason why NPT isolated, NPT try to reduce the number of nuclear weapons, is reduce the risk of the nuclear war. Remember the fear during the Cold War, because after or if the strong country have a lot of number of nuclear weapon or strong kind of like the case of hydrogen nuclear weapon, in this society in this society the risk of the extinction of the human beings can be happen, because if the strong country try to attack by nuclear weapon again and again or to each other, we think that this situation is this situation sometimes needs the extinction of the human beings. We think this is unacceptable. Do you have any point of information? No. we think that international society should avoid the risk of the such kind of nuclear incident because the international society have the power. Society have the power to do that. What we told you in this debate. First, we say, let's look back the viewpoint of international society. This debate happens by the viewpoint of the international society because the only actor to take this proposal is international society. International society have their own benefit, own incentive, and they government side try to have the viewpoint of the God, maybe God, because they want to improve, they want to show the fairness inside such kind of absolute fairness. But we say it is quite unrealistic because as long as international society is a union of a lot of countries, we say this power imbalance must happen in the status quo, and nobody as long we say because of such kind of practical reason, nobody want to such kind of irrational country have the nuclear weapon. We say the growing up of the irrational country should not be accepted. That's why we say we are very proud to oppose.
Ladies and gentlemen in this house, I have two points. The first one is about the status quo is fine or not, and secondly, after taking this proposal, the situation of the world is dangerous or not, and I'll explain one by one. The government side, the government side said that in this situation, this situation in the status quo is unfair. So every country have a power of the nuclear weapon. However, my partner always told you that even in the status quo, there are the economical sanction or the other factor of the power imbalance exists, and the government didn't mention that the unfairness is how unfair situation is serious, or such situation will how bad was such situation. So we think that such unfair situation must happen, and so the status quo is fine, and also after taking this proposal, we mentioned that there are even after taking this proposal that the unfair situation is left between the rich and poor countries. And the second flashpoint, after taking this proposal, the situation will become danger or not. They mentioned that the deterrence power will happen, so we can avoid the war or the conflict. But we don't think that we think that for irrational country also have nuclear weapons, so the situation must become worse. And my partner told you that such country have a high such country are the high likely to use nuclear weapons, because in such country is have a dictatorship, and such dictator ignore the other people's opinion, and they don't care about this other countries. They don't care about the relationship with other countries, so they must use the nuclear weapons. So we think after taking this proposal, the dangerous situation will happen. So today I beg to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, so the official side doesn't deny that. So actually, so some countries exploit the small countries' the resources and manpower. So then the problem exists, and moreover, so they say that such situation we can justify. However, it is not true. So fundamentally, so my investigation and my grandfather clearly told you. So each country has the right to protect themselves, and moreover, so they can deny, they can oppose other countries' opinion. So then, we strongly propose this motion. Okay, in my speech, I summarized it great. I summarized 2 points. So first one is the status quo situation. So the problem exists or not, and we can justify it or not. Secondly, after adoption, what happened, no or not, and we can solve or not. So okay, so I explain one by one. So firstly, so I summarized the status quo situation. So okay, so in my speech, so I clearly told you, for example, the Chinese case. So Chinese case, so place the other Asian country, for example, the Vietnam and so forth. So they exploit other countries' resources. So by using their big strong power. Mainly the military power. So the opposition sides don't rebuttal this point. So actually, so such situation happened. However, so we cannot justify this situation. So the opposition side, the member speaker said, the opposition side member speaker said, so we can justify such unfair situation, and so because so firstly, so in the international society, no one governs each country, so the only power, by using the only power, so we get the balance. So and moreover, so another country has the right to refuse the other country's position of the nuclear power decision, but it is clearly not true. So because of my grandfather and my clearly told you, so each country can oppose the other country's operation or other country's opinion. So each country can decide their policy or how they use their power or manpower and so forth. So then other countries don't have the right to such things. So then they don't they don't refute this point, and there is no reason for them, so we cannot justify this point. So then the under status quo is severe situation. And secondly, so in the after plan adoption, so my great partner told you, so we can solve this problem. So because so another country cannot ignore the nuclear power. So then, so the fair negotiation occurs. So we will solve, but the opposition side said so. For example, the irrational dictator use the nuclear power. So then, and there is a high possibility they say that, but so as you know, so actually, so for example, North Korea or for example the Pakistan and so forth, they don't use actually. So then, so there's no reason why so such people likely to use such nuclear weapons. So we will so even such dictators, so they don't use. So my great clearly told you. So they think the risk and so forth. So then they don't use easily. So for this reason, we don't propose this motion. That's all. Thank you.